Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Today I'm going to do a review of the movie Straight Outta Compton. As many people know who are familiar with my channel, I'm a big fan of hip hop. I often play hip hop songs in my videos or, I play the instrumentals. But recently I've had to cut back because of YouTube's copyright rules and all that stuff. And I don't need any more strikes against my channel. But anyway, I'm a big fan of the art form. I've seen it evolve over time. And back in the 80s, I used to listen to NWA. Um, and so I was real interested in watching this movie. Um, the thing is, back then in the 80s, you had so much more variety in hip hop than you have right now. Hip hop had so many different types of voices. You had the conscious hip hop, you had the party hip hop, you had the so-called gangster rap, but you had variety. Today, that's not the case. Today, you have a lot of negativity in hip hop that is drowning out more conscious voices, more conscious and political voices. Those voices are being pushed to the margins right now. And this negative brand of music has become dominant. And all of that wouldn't be possible without NWA. NWA is sort of like Pandora's box. They unleashed something upon this hip hop culture, and hip hop hasn't been the same since. They were pioneers, but they were pioneers not necessarily in a good way, but in a bad way. So I used to listen to them back in the day. And as I watched the movie, I noticed a couple of things. First of all, they didn't really talk too much about the negative impact of the music or the negative messages in the music. They kind of touched on it, but they didn't really address it in a thorough fashion. NWA had songs that celebrated drug dealing. They had songs that celebrated the gangster lifestyle and gang violence. They had songs that talked about life in the hood. And I understand, like, their whole perspective about being CNN for the hood and stuff, bringing to the world the plight of the African American community or struggling urban communities. And I get that. I understand that. And some of the members of that group actually lived through those experiences. Some of them actually did sell drugs. Some of them were actually involved in gangs and stuff. So they were, in a sense, a product of their environment, and they created something that was in line with their environment. So if you come from a toxic environment, you're going to produce toxic things often. Your art and your music is going to reflect that environment. And that's what happened with NWA. Their art reflected their environment. And see, the thing, as I said before, you had a lot of diversity within hip hop. You had different voices. So to hear their one voice out of the many didn't have as much of a negative impact back then that the music does today. Because today, that voice is now the dominant voice in hip hop. So they didn't address, that aspect of their music. They didn't address like the negativity in terms of promoting drug dealing and gang violence and just negativity, drug usage, alcoholism, and the whole issue of misogyny wasn't even dealt with at all in this movie. A lot of their lyrics were very misogynistic. They basically degraded black women by calling them bitches and hoes and, doing songs like a bitch is a bitch and bitches ain't shit and all this stuff. They had plenty of songs along those lines. And that whole issue wasn't even really touched upon in this video, in the movie. You know, they didn't talk about that too much. And I think there should have been some space in that movie for a serious uh, discussion, not necessarily a discussion like an exchange of ideas, but that whole concept of misogyny should have been addressed at some point. And as a lot of people know, recently Dr. Dre has acknowledged that he had problems in the past with abusing women and things of that nature, and none of that was touched upon in the movie. We don't see that aspect of the movie. But one thing that I really do enjoy about this movie is the fact that they dealt with the issue of police brutality. And that was one of the NWA's most popular songs, that song, Fuck the Police. And that song dealt with police harassment and police brutality. And this movie shows how the police basically harassed black men and brutalized black men. And they showed the the beating of Rodney King, and they showed the riots that took place in Los Angeles. Because at the time, you know, despite the fact that they had that video evidence of Rodney King being beaten like a slave, those police officers got off. And unfortunately, things like that happen today. We had an Eric Gardner case where this brother was strangled on camera and no indictment had been entered against the police officer who took his life. So we see this problem replaying itself. And back when that occurred, you know, I was in the streets protesting in Washington, D.C. That whole Rodney King incident was one of the events that really sparked my involvement in the movement for my people. So seeing this movie, you know, just reminded me of that time, seeing the people outraged and seeing the LA riots reminded me of the riots that happened here in Baltimore not too long ago. So this movie was very timely in terms of the issue of police harassment and police brutality. I thought that was on point. Now, from an artistic perspective, there are a couple of flaws that I saw in the movie. You know, even though the movie kept me engaged the whole time, even though it was very entertaining, um, the acting was okay. You know, it was decent. It wasn't superb. It's not Oscar worthy or anything. The actors seem to be like amateurs. You know, the best actor in the movie is the actor who plays the role of Eazy-E. You know, he does a great impersonation of Eazy-E, and you know, his character was the most interesting character in the movie. So that's one of the flaws. Another flaw is just the casting. A lot of the characters or actors did not look like the characters that they were portraying. Like they had this one character who played Snoop Dogg. He did look nothing like Snoop Dogg. So, I mean, whoever did the casting, they didn't do a great job. They could have gotten people who looked more like the characters that they were portraying. And, you know, they could have gotten somebody a little bit bigger to play Suge, you know, so that he would look more intimidating. Because the person that they had play Suge Knight looked about the same height as Dr. Dre, even though Suge Knight, from what I understand, is, you know, a little significantly bigger than Dr. Dre. But, you know, so that's just a minor thing. But he still had that intimidating presence and stuff as, you know, as Suge Knight has. So I think his casting was decent. So this is a good movie. I recommend that people check it out. If you're a fan of hip hop, if you're a fan of NWA and their music, you'll enjoy this movie. You'll enjoy the music and, just seeing the characters interact and just seeing the different courses that everyone's career took. They show what happened to Eazy-E. They show how Ice Cube broke off from the group. They show Dr. Dre going to death row and all that stuff. And they even have a clip of an actor playing Tupac. And I have to say now, in terms of the casting, they did a great job with Tupac because for a second, it almost seemed like that was actually Tupac in that booth spitting those rhymes. And, just the mannerisms, the facial expressions, they really found the right person to play that role. I wish his character had more involvement in the movie. I wish he had more screen time because he was great. He actually looked like Tupac and he sounded like Tupac. So that was a great job. But anyway, check out the movie. Rate, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Please tell me what you thought about the movie if you saw the movie. Peace. Oh, there was one other thing that I forgot. And I forgot to deal with the whole issue of artist exploitation. They touch on that in the movie. They show how NWA's manager exploited the entire group and got over on the group, and how basically his exploitation of the group led to the collapse of the group, led to the group breaking apart. And they talked about the whole issue of so-called anti-Semitism. Uh, at one point, Ice Cube broke off from the group, and there was some feud between him and NWA, and he had this powerful, classic diss song called "No Vaseline," and in that song, he calls out the manager, and somehow he's accused of being anti-Semitic for doing so because the manager is Jewish, and also at the time, Ice Cube had been involved with the nation on some level, so people were trying to paint him as being anti-Semitic. But really, that whole aspect of the movie is sort of like um, representative of what happens often in the hip hop industry or just the entertainment industry, period. You have these, often, many of these managers and company executives are often, white or Jewish, and they exploit artists. They get over on artists. They exploit and milk them for everything that they're worth. At the end of the day, the artist ends up broke, and these companies end up getting richer and richer, while the artists get poorer and poorer. And you know, NWA, they had their own message before they met this manager, but often these companies, they shape the message instead of the artist shaping the message. And that's part of the reason why this negative hip hop has become so dominant today, because that's what they are seeking. Those are the types of artists they want. Those are the type of artists they promote. That's the type of message that they promote to our people, a message that is destroying our people. And if we're to, engage in some kind of protest or demonstration or to express our outrage, it should be expressed towards these companies that put out this poison and poison the minds of our young people. Peace for real this time. I'm out.